The crimson sunset painted the sky as Violet Lambert clutched her side, blood seeping through her fingers as she crawled away from the train tracks. Her elegant traveling dress was torn and soiled, once pristine white gloves now stained with dirt and her own blood. The distant whistle of the departing train faded as consciousness slipped from her grasp. Brayden Foster squinted against the setting sun, pulling back on the reins of his dappled gray stallion. Something unusual caught his eye near the railroad tracks, a splash of color against the dusty landscape. Drawing closer, he realized with a start that it was a woman, lying motionless beside the steel rails. "Whoa, Storm," he called to his horse, dismounting with practiced ease. His spurs jingled as his boots hit the ground, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness of the approaching evening. The woman was a sorry sight, her face bruised, a nasty gash along her temple, and her breathing shallow. Her fine clothing, though damaged, spoke of wealth and breeding that stood out starkly against the rugged frontier surroundings of 1878 Wyoming territory. With gentle hands, Brayden carefully turned her over, checking for broken bones. The woman moaned softly but didn't open her eyes. He noted the bruising around her wrists, the torn fingernails, signs of a struggle. This was no accident. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing pain-clouded blue eyes that struggled to focus on his face. "Who?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Brayden slid one arm beneath her shoulders, another under her knees, and lifted her with the utmost care. Her body felt fragile in his arms, like a wounded bird. "Name's Brayden Foster," he said, his deep voice gentle. "And your journey's with me now." He carried her to his horse, positioning her as comfortably as possible before mounting behind her. With one strong arm holding her secure against his chest, he clicked his tongue, urging Storm forward toward his homestead. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness as they rode. Brayden felt her shiver against him and pulled his worn leather duster tighter around her slender frame. His cabin appeared on the horizon as the first stars emerged. It wasn't much, a sturdy two-room structure with a small stable attached, but it was clean and warm. He'd built it with his own hands after returning from the war, seeking solitude after witnessing too much bloodshed. "Almost there," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Just hold on a little longer, miss." Inside the cabin, he laid her gently on his bed, quickly stoking the dying embers in the fireplace before fetching water and clean cloths. He'd learned field medicine during the war, skills he'd hoped never to use again, yet here he was. The woman's eyes opened as he approached with a basin of water. Fear flashed across her face and she tried to push herself up. "Easy now," Brayden soothed, keeping his distance. "You're safe here. I found you by the tracks. You're hurt pretty bad. The train," she whispered, wincing as she touched her temple. "They pushed me. I need to." Her words trailed off as pain overtook her again. Brayden moved closer, showing his palms in a gesture of peace. "I need to clean these wounds, miss. I promise I'll be proper about it." She studied him for a long moment before giving a slight nod. Her trust, however tentative, felt like a precious thing. "Violet," she said softly. "My name is Violet Lambert." "Miss Lambert," he acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I'm going to take care of these cuts now." As he worked, Brayden noticed how she flinched at his touch despite his gentleness. Whatever had happened on that train had left more than physical wounds. Still, she remained composed, only the occasional sharp intake of breath betraying her pain. "You have a doctor's touch, Mr. Foster," she observed, her voice stronger now. "War teaches a man things he'd rather not know," he replied simply. "Including how to patch up the wounded." "Which side?" she asked, then immediately shook her head. "I'm sorry, that's improper of me." "Union," Brayden answered anyway. But that was another life. Out here, a man is judged by how he lives now, not where he fought then. When he'd finished cleaning and bandaging her visible wounds, Brayden fetched her a cup of coffee laced with whiskey for the pain. "I'll sleep by the fire," he said, gathering a blanket. "You take the bed. Tomorrow, when you're feeling stronger, you can tell me what happened. Or not. Your choice." Violet watched him move around the cabin, this tall, broad-shouldered stranger who had saved her from certain death. His movements were efficient, his manner reserved but kind. In the golden glow of the firelight, she noticed the flecks of gray at his temples, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of a man who'd seen his share of hardships. "Thank you," she said softly. "Most men would have ridden past." Brayden paused, his back to her as he arranged his makeshift bed. "No decent man would leave anyone to die alone in the wilderness, Miss Lambert. There aren't many decent men left in this world, Mr. Foster." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Get some rest. You're safe here tonight." As exhaustion claimed her, Violet's last thought was that for the first time in months, she actually believed those words. She was safe. Dawn broke with golden fingers stretching across the sky. Brayden had slept little, his senses alert to every sound both outside the cabin and the occasional whimper from his unexpected guest, as nightmares disturbed her sleep. He rose quietly, stoked the fire, and began preparing a simple breakfast. The familiar routine calmed him, helping to organize his thoughts about the woman sleeping in his bed and the trouble that had clearly found her. Violet woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, panic rising in her chest as unfamiliar surroundings came into focus. Then the events of the previous evening rushed back the train, the attack, the fall, and the cowboy who'd found her. She pushed herself up slowly, wincing at the pain that seemed to radiate from every part of her body. Her dress was hopelessly ruined, her hair a tangled mess. What would her father say if he could see her now? The thought brought a bitter laugh that caught in her throat. "Morning," Brayden said, turning from the stove. "How are you feeling?" "As though I've been thrown from a train," she replied, attempting a smile that faltered. "Which is appropriate, I suppose." He brought her a cup of coffee, keeping a respectful distance. "Strong, black, and sweet. Good medicine for what ails you." Violet accepted the cup gratefully, the warmth spreading through her cold fingers. "I need to get to Cheyenne," she said after taking a sip. "As quickly as possible." Brayden sat on a chair across from the bed. "That's a 3-day ride from here, Miss Lambert. And you're in no condition to travel. You don't understand. There are men looking for me, dangerous men." Her voice trembled slightly. "I can't stay here. I'm putting you at risk just by being in your home." "What kind of trouble are you in?" he asked directly. Violet looked down at her coffee, weighing how much to reveal to this stranger. Trust didn't come easily to her anymore, but he had saved her life. "I witnessed something I shouldn't have," she finally said. "A murder. In Chicago. The killer is a powerful man with connections to both business and politics. When I went to the police, I discovered he had them in his pocket too." Brayden's expression remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. "So you ran." "I had no choice. He sent men after me. I thought I'd lost them in Kansas City, but they found me on the train to Cheyenne." She touched the bruise on her face. "They said they were taking me back to Chicago, but I knew I wouldn't survive the journey, so I fought and somehow I fell from the train." "Or they pushed you," Brayden added grimly. Violet nodded. "They'll backtrack once they realize I'm not dead. I need to keep moving." Brayden stood, pacing the small room. "You need to heal first. My nearest neighbor is 20 miles away. No one will find you here for a few days at least." "I can't impose on you," she protested. "You've done enough already. Miss Lambert, I'm not in the habit of saving people just to send them off to die elsewhere." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Rest today. Eat, regain your strength. Tomorrow we can talk about getting you safely to wherever you need to go." Violet wanted to argue further but lacked the energy. The coffee had revived her somewhat, but every movement sent pain shooting through her body. Reluctantly, she nodded. "One day," she conceded. "But then I need to move on." Brayden brought her a plate of food, bacon, beans, and biscuits. Simple fare, but the best meal Violet had seen in days. As she ate, she studied her rescuer more carefully. He moved with a slight limp she hadn't noticed the night before, his left leg seemingly stiffer than his right. War injury, she guessed, recalling his earlier comment. "Have you lived here long, Mr. Foster?" she asked, breaking the silence. 5 years, he replied, settling back into his chair with his own plate. "Built this place myself after coming west. It's very efficient," she offered, looking around at the sparse but clean cabin. A hint of amusement crossed his face. "That's a polite way of saying it's bare. I don't need much." "No, Mrs. Foster, to add a woman's touch." The question escaped before Violet could consider its impropriety. "No," he said simply, offering no further explanation. They ate in silence for a while before Violet spoke again. "I had a fiancé back in Chicago, Edward Harrington. He worked for the man I witnessed murdering someone. When I told Edward what I'd seen, Her voice faltered. "He told his employer. Apparently his loyalty had a price, and it wasn't to me." Brayden's jaw tightened. "Some men don't deserve the title." "I was naive," Violet admitted. "I believed in love and loyalty and justice. I've learned better since. Don't let one snake poison your view of the whole garden, Miss Lambert." His words surprised her, as did the gentleness beneath them. This rough cowboy spoke with an eloquence she hadn't expected. After breakfast, Brayden checked her wounds again, rebandaging the worst of them with fresh cloths. His hands were large but dexterous, his touch clinical but respectful. "The cut on your temple is deep, but head wounds always bleed more than they ought," he explained. "It should heal clean if we keep it from festering. Your ribs are likely bruised, not broken. You're breathing easier today." "You would have made a fine doctor," Violet observed. Something dark flickered in his eyes. "No, I've seen too much death to heal for a living." He left soon after to tend to his horses and check his property, giving Violet time alone to rest and think. She knew she couldn't stay. Her presence endangered this kind man, who'd already done more for her than anyone had in months. Yet the thought of facing the world again, alone and hunted, filled her with dread. Restlessness eventually drove her from the bed. Moving gingerly, she explored the cabin's main room. A bookshelf caught her attention, filled not with the dime novels one might expect from a frontier man, but classics. Shakespeare, Dickens, Homer, Whitman. Brayden Foster was more educated than his rough exterior suggested. A small framed tintype sat on the shelf, a younger Brayden in a Union uniform, standing beside another soldier. Brothers, perhaps, given the similar features. She wondered what had become of him. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent panic surging through her. Had they found her already? She looked around desperately for a weapon, grabbing a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace just as the door opened. Brayden stepped inside, stopping short at the sight of her brandishing the poker. "Planning on adding head injury to my list of ailments?" he asked mildly. Violet lowered the makeshift weapon, embarrassment replacing fear. "I heard a horse, I thought. Just me and Storm returning," he assured her. Then, noting her distress, "You're safe here, Violet, for now at least." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it eased her tension slightly. "I'm sorry," she said, returning the poker to its place. "Living in fear becomes a habit you'll need to break someday." He hung his hat on a peg by the door. No one should live like that. Some of us don't have a choice." Brayden considered her for a moment, then gestured to the bookshelf. "I see you found my library, not what you expected from a cowboy." "No," she admitted. "Though I'm beginning to think there's much about you that defies expectation, Mr. Foster." "Most people are more than they appear at first glance, Miss Lambert, including you, I suspect." The day passed quietly. Violet rested while Brayden tended to his small ranch, checking fences, caring for the horses, and hunting for their supper. By evening, a rabbit stew simmered over the fire, filling the cabin with savory aromas that reminded Violet how far she was from the elegant dining rooms of Chicago society. Strange how she didn't miss those rooms at all. As they ate supper, Brayden finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "Where will you go, if not Cheyenne?" Violet stared into her bowl. "I have an aunt in San Francisco. I've written to her, but I don't know if my letters arrived." "She's my mother's sister, my only family not under my father's influence." "Your father's involved in this." Brayden's surprise was evident. "Not in the murder," Violet clarified. "But he's a business partner of the man responsible. He refused to believe my account, said I was confused, hysterical. He arranged my engagement to Edward to settle me down. When I fled Chicago, he disowned me. All to protect his business interests," Brayden concluded, disgust evident in his tone. "Money and reputation are everything in Chicago society," Violet said bitterly. "I was simply a commodity to be traded for advantage." Brayden's hand tightened around his spoon. "No person should be treated as property. I fought a war over that belief." The passion in his voice stirred something in Violet, a reminder that principles still existed in a world that had shown her precious little integrity. Night fell, and once again Brayden prepared to sleep by the fire, giving Violet his bed. This time, however, she protested more firmly. "I can't continue displacing you from your bed, Mr. Foster. The floor will aggravate your leg." He looked startled. "My leg is fine." "It pains you when the weather changes," she observed. "You favored it this morning before the sun burned off the dew. War wound." "Gettysburg," he said shortly, clearly uncomfortable with her perception. "But it doesn't trouble me much." "Enough lies have been told around me lately," Violet said quietly. "Please don't add to them, even kind ones." Their eyes met across the room, a moment of understanding passing between them. Without another word, Brayden nodded and took the bed, while Violet made herself comfortable near the fire. In the darkened cabin, with only the crackling flames for company, Violet finally voiced the question that had been troubling her since she'd awoken. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Foster? You know nothing about me. I could be lying about everything." Silence stretched between them, long enough that she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, his deep voice emerged from the darkness. "During the war, I was separated from my regiment after Antietam, wounded, lost behind enemy lines. A farmer found me a Southern man with every reason to turn me in or leave me to die. Instead, he hid me in his barn, tended my wounds, and helped me rejoin my unit when I was strong enough." He paused. "I asked him the same question you just asked me. Know what he said?" "What?" Violet prompted. "He said, in times like these, when the world's gone mad, we have to remind ourselves what it means to be human. Sometimes that means helping a stranger simply because they need help." Brayden's voice softened. "I've never forgotten that. So when I found you beside those tracks, there was never a question of what to do." Violet felt tears prick her eyes, thankful for the darkness that hid them. "Thank you for reminding me that goodness still exists, Mr. Foster." "Brayden," he corrected gently. "If we're sharing a cabin, you might as well use my given name." "Brayden," she repeated, the name feeling right on her lips. "Good night." "Good night, Violet," Morning brought clear skies and a decision. Despite her insistence on leaving, Violet's condition made travel impossible. Reluctantly, she agreed to stay another day, though anxiety made her restless. I should at least send a telegram to my aunt, she fretted. Let her know I'm alive and still coming. Nearest telegraph office is in Riverdale, 20 miles north, Brayden told her. I need supplies anyway. I could send your message for you. Violet hesitated, then nodded. That would be kind, but be careful. The men looking for me might be watching telegraph offices. I'll be careful, he promised. Write your message, I'll leave within the hour. While Brayden prepared for the journey, Violet penned a brief note to her aunt, deliberately vague about her location but assuring her of her continued journey west. When she handed the paper to Brayden, their fingers brushed momentarily, sending an unexpected warmth through her hand. I should be back by nightfall, he said, tucking the message into his pocket. There's food prepared and my rifle is loaded beside the door if you need it. I know how to shoot, Violet assured him. At his raised eyebrow, she added, My father believed women should know how to defend themselves, even if society deemed it unladylike. Perhaps the only useful thing he ever taught me. Brayden nodded approvingly. Bar the door after I leave. Don't open it unless you hear my voice. After he departed, the cabin felt eerily quiet. Violet busied herself tidying up, finding comfort in the simple tasks. Her body ached less today, the bruises beginning to fade from angry purple to sickly yellow-green. She found herself drawn again to Brayden's bookshelf, selecting a volume of Whitman's poetry. Outside, the Wyoming landscape stretched in vast emptiness so different from Chicago's crowded streets. She sat by the window, reading aloud occasionally, finding the poet's celebration of America's wild beauty particularly fitting in this setting. The day passed slowly. As promised, Violet kept the rifle close, startling at every distant sound. By late afternoon, she began watching anxiously for Brayden's return, surprised by how much she had come to depend on his presence in just 2 days. The sun was setting when she finally heard hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by caution. She positioned herself beside the window, rifle ready, until Brayden's familiar figure came into view. She unbarred the door as he approached, noticing immediately the tension in his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked as he entered. Brayden removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. There were men asking questions in town, 2 of them. Well-dressed, not locals. They were showing a photograph around a photograph of you. Violet sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. "They've found me." "Not yet," Brayden corrected, setting down his saddlebags. "But they're looking in the right area. They know you survived the fall from the train." "Did you send my telegram?" He nodded. "I was careful. Used a different name, paid a boy to deliver it for me. I don't think I was noticed." "We need to leave," Violet said firmly. "First light tomorrow." "I've imposed on your kindness too long already." Brayden began unpacking his supplies. "They're checking the stage routes, the railroad stations, all the usual ways out." "Then what do you suggest? I can't stay here forever." He turned to face her, his expression resolute. "I'll take you to San Francisco." Violet stared at him, certain she had misheard. "That's nearly 1,000 miles. I know the territory. We can avoid the main routes, take trails the railroad men won't know about." He continued unpacking, his movements deliberate. "I bought supplies enough for a long journey." "Why would you do this?" she asked, bewildered by his offer. "You barely know me." Brayden paused, a package of coffee in his hand. "I know enough. I know you're brave and principled, willing to risk everything to see justice done. I know you've been betrayed by those who should have protected you, and I know that if those men find you, they'll kill you." His eyes met hers, unwavering. I won't let that happen." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of a connection neither had anticipated. "Your ranch," Violet protested. "Your home. You can't just leave it." "My neighbor Anderson will look after things. I've done the same for him when he's gone to visit his daughter in Denver." Brayden's tone was matter of fact. "We'll leave at first light, avoid Riverdale entirely, and head northwest through the mountains." Violet knew she should refuse, knew she was dragging this good man into danger not of his making. But the alternative was facing her pursuers alone, a prospect that filled her with dread. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the magnitude of his offer. They spent the evening preparing, Brayden explaining their route using a rough map he sketched on the table. They would follow game trails through the mountains, avoiding settlements where possible, traveling as an unremarkable husband and wife to avoid suspicion when they did need to enter towns. The casual way he suggested this pretense made Violet blush despite herself. Brayden noticed and cleared his throat awkwardly. "It's the safest cover," he explained. "Two people traveling alone draw attention. A married couple doesn't." "Of course," Violet agreed, focusing intently on the map. "It's a practical solution." They slept little that night, anticipation of the journey ahead keeping both awake. Violet found herself studying Brayden's profile in the dying firelight, wondering at the twists of fate that had brought her to this remote cabin and this unexpected protector. Dawn found them already prepared to depart. Brayden had saddled Storm for himself and a smaller bay mare named Penny for Violet. Their supplies were packed efficiently, with Brayden insisting they travel light but prepared for changing weather. "Can you ride astride?" he asked as they prepared to mount. "Side saddle will slow us down and mark you as a city woman." Violet nodded, grateful for the men's clothing. Brayden had provided a spare shirt and trousers that were too large but serviceable when belted and rolled up. "My father insisted I learn proper riding before he allowed the side saddle." Another unexpected blessing from him. As they rode away from the cabin, Violet noticed Brayden glance back, just once, a flicker of emotion crossing his face before he set his eyes resolutely forward. "You're leaving your home for me," she said softly. "I don't know if I can ever repay such a debt." "It's not a debt," he replied. "It's a choice, one I make freely." They rode hard that first day, keeping to tree cover where possible, avoiding the main trails. Brayden set a demanding pace, and though Violet's body protested still healing from her injuries, she refused to complain. By midday, they had covered significant ground, the terrain gradually changing as they climbed higher into the foothills. They stopped to rest the horses by a small stream, eating a cold lunch of jerky and hard biscuits. Violet stretched her sore muscles, trying not to wince visibly. "We'll make camp early today," Brayden said, noticing her discomfort despite her efforts to hide it. "Give your body time to adjust to the saddle." "I can keep going," she protested. "This isn't a race, Violet. Better to pace ourselves than break down halfway there." As they continued their journey, Brayden pointed out landmarks and wildlife, displaying an intimate knowledge of the wilderness. He identified plants with medicinal properties, showed her how to read animal tracks, and explained how to navigate by sun and stars. "How did you learn all this?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Some from my father. He was a trapper before he settled down, some from books. The rest from necessity after I came west." He guided Storm around a fallen log. "A man either learns the ways of the land out here, or the land kills him." By late afternoon, they reached a sheltered spot beside a small lake, protected on three sides by rock formations. Brayden declared it their campsite for the night, helping Violet dismount before tending to the horses. "It's beautiful here," Violet said, taking in the pristine water reflecting the mountains beyond. "One of my favorite spots," Brayden admitted, securing the horses. "Used to come fishing here when I needed time away from everything." While he gathered firewood, Violet unpacked their cooking supplies, pleased to contribute something to their partnership. The domestic routine felt surprisingly comfortable. Brayden building a small, well-contained fire, while Violet prepared a simple stew with ingredients from their supplies. As darkness fell and stars appeared in astonishing profusion overhead, they sat beside the fire, the wilderness enveloping them in its vastness. "I never saw stars like this in Chicago," Violet marveled, neck craned upward. "The gas lamps and coal smoke hide them." "One of the things I love about this country," Brayden said, his voice soft, "reminds a person of their proper place in the world." "And what place is that?" she asked. "Small," he replied, "but not insignificant, part of something larger." They fell into companionable silence, the crackling fire and distant owl calls the only sounds disturbing the night. "Tell me about your life before Chicago," Brayden eventually said. "If you don't mind speaking of it." Violet considered the request. It had been so long since anyone had shown interest in her past, not her connections or her father's wealth, but her as a person. "I grew up in Boston," she began. "My mother died when I was 12. Consumption. My father was distant before that, but afterward he buried himself in his business affairs. I was raised primarily by governesses until I was sent to finishing school." "Sounds lonely," Brayden observed. "It was," Violet admitted. "I found solace in books. I wanted to attend college. Vassar had just opened for women, but father forbade it. Said no man would marry a woman with too much education." Brayden snorted derisively. "Foolish thinking. We moved to Chicago when I was 19. Father's business interests had expanded. That's where I met Edward." Her voice cooled at the name. "He worked for my father's business partner, Richard Blackwell, the man I later saw murder a union organizer who was threatening to expose unsafe conditions in his factory. And your fiancé chose Blackwell over you when you witnessed this." Violet nodded, staring into the fire. "Edward said I was being hysterical, imagining things. Then I overheard him telling Blackwell about my accusations. The next day, men came to escort me to a sanitarium for my nervous condition. I slipped out my bedroom window that night with whatever I could carry and bought a ticket west." Brayden was silent for a long moment. "Your courage is remarkable," he finally said. "Not courage," she countered. "Desperation." "Courage often wears that disguise," he replied. The firelight caught the angles of his face, illuminating eyes that held respect rather than pity. It was a novel experience for Violet. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting attention from herself. "You mentioned a father who was a trapper. What of the rest of your family?" A shadow crossed Brayden's face. "My mother died bringing my sister into the world. The baby followed a few days later. I was 10. Father and I managed until I was 17, then the war came." He prodded the fire with a stick. "I enlisted with my younger brother Thomas. He didn't come home." "I'm sorry," Violet said softly. "Was he the one in the photograph, on your bookshelf?" Brayden looked surprised, then nodded. "You noticed that?" "I notice a lot of things, Mr. Foster. It's what got me into this trouble in the first place." A small smile tugged at his lips. "I thought we'd agreed on Brayden." "Brayden," she corrected, returning his smile. "So what brought you west after the war? Too many ghosts back east, and too many reminders of what we fought for being forgotten as money became the new master." His voice took on an edge. "Men like your Blackwell were buying up influence, treating workers like disposable tools. I wanted no part of it. So you found this wilderness." "Found myself in this wilderness," he corrected. "There's a difference." As the fire burned down, Brayden prepared their sleeping arrangements, separate bedrolls positioned on opposite sides of the fire. The gesture of respect touched Violet deeply. "We should rest," he said, checking the horses one final time. "Tomorrow will be another long day." "Brayden," Violet called softly as he turned away. "Thank you, not just for the journey but for seeing me, the real me. It's been a long time since anyone has." In the flickering light, she saw something warm and unguarded pass across his face. "Good night, Violet. Good night." Dawn broke with a light mist over the lake, creating an ethereal landscape as they packed their camp. Violet moved more easily today, her body adjusting to the rigors of travel. Brayden noticed the difference, nodding approvingly as she mounted Penny without assistance. "We'll follow the ridge today," he explained as they set off. "Harder going but less chance of running into anyone." The terrain grew more challenging, with narrow trails winding through pine forests and rocky outcroppings. Brayden led confidently, occasionally pointing out landmarks or signs of wildlife. By midday, they had climbed high enough to see the vast expanse of wilderness stretching before them, endless waves of forested mountains fading into the distance. "It's magnificent," Violet breathed, reining in beside Brayden at an overlook. "I never imagined such vastness." "This is why I stay," he said simply. "The freedom of it. No man can own all this, though many have tried." They continued westward, eventually descending into a valley as afternoon waned. Brayden grew increasingly alert, scanning their surroundings with a vigilance that made Violet nervous. "What is it?" she finally asked. "We're approaching Blackwater Creek," he explained. "There's a trading post there, last outpost before 100 miles of wilderness. We need supplies, but it's risky." Violet tensed. "Will the men looking for me know about it?" "Possibly. But we can't avoid every settlement between here and California." He considered their options. "We'll approach at dusk. I'll go in alone while you wait with the horses in the trees. With luck, I'll be in and out before anyone takes notice." They made camp early, several miles from the trading post, using the remaining daylight to prepare. Brayden gave Violet detailed instructions on what to do if he didn't return. "If I'm not back by midnight, take Penny and head northwest. Follow the North Star until you reach the river, then follow it downstream. You'll eventually reach Fort Harrison." "I'm not leaving without you," Violet insisted. "You might have to," he replied firmly. "Promise me you'll save yourself if things go wrong." She wanted to refuse but saw the determination in his eyes. "I promise," she said reluctantly. As dusk approached, they rode quietly toward the trading post. In the fading light, Violet could make out a sturdy log building with a few horses hitched outside. Brayden guided them to a copse of trees about 100 yards away. "Wait here," he instructed, dismounting. "If anyone approaches who isn't me, ride hard and don't look back." "Be careful," Violet whispered, surprising herself by reaching out to squeeze his hand. Brayden's eyes met hers, and he returned the pressure briefly before slipping away toward the trading post. Alone with the horses, minutes stretched interminably. Violet strained to see the building in the gathering darkness, heart pounding with each shadow that moved. The sound of men's voices occasionally carried on the evening breeze, but she couldn't make out words. Half an hour passed, then an hour. Worry gnawed at her. What if Brayden had been recognized? What if her pursuers were waiting inside? A twig snapped nearby. Violet froze, hand moving to the pistol Brayden had insisted she carry. Another sound closer this time. Fighting panic, she began to untie Penny's reins, preparing to flee. "It's me," Brayden's voice came softly from the darkness. "Don't shoot." Relief washed over her as he emerged from the shadows, arms full of supplies. "You were gone so long," she whispered. Had to wait for some rowdy miners to leave before I could make my purchases without drawing attention, he explained, quickly securing the supplies to the horses. But we need to move, now. What happened? There was a bulletin posted offering a reward for information about a woman matching your description. $500. Violet's blood ran cold. Blackwell. Brayden nodded grimly. The storekeeper was watching me too closely. I don't think he recognized me, but we shouldn't linger. They rode through the night, pushing the horses harder than before, wanting distance between themselves and the trading post. The moon provided enough light to navigate, but the journey was tense, both riders starting at every nocturnal sound. It was nearly dawn when Brayden finally called a halt in a protected ravine. The horses were exhausted, and Violet was swaying in her saddle. "We need rest," he declared, helping her dismount. Her legs buckled as they touched the ground, and he caught her against his chest. For a moment they stood close, his arms steadying her, her face turned up to his. "Thank you," she murmured, acutely aware of his proximity, of the strength in his hands at her waist. Brayden stepped back first, clearing his throat. "Let me see to the horses." They made a cold camp, not risking a fire. Sharing jerky and dried apples from their supplies, they spoke in hushed tones about what they had learned. "They're casting a wide net," Brayden observed. "That bulletin had descriptions of me to the man seen with you." Violet's eyes widened. "I've put you in danger." "I put myself here," he reminded her, "but we'll need to be more careful, change our appearance when we next approach civilization." "How far to the next settlement?" she asked, pulling her blanket tighter against the pre-dawn chill. 4 days' ride to Silverton. "Small mining town. We can skirt it entirely if needed." Violet nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "We should sleep while we can." "I'll take first watch," Brayden insisted. "You rest." Despite her protests that he needed sleep too, Brayden remained vigilant while Violet surrendered to exhaustion. He watched her sleeping form in the gray light of early morning, struck by how quickly she had come to matter to him. When he woke her midday to take her turn at watch, she seemed refreshed, insisting he get some rest while she kept guard. Brayden hesitated but eventually agreed, settling nearby with his rifle close at hand. "Wake me at any sound," he instructed. "Don't investigate anything yourself." "I'm not helpless, Brayden," she reminded him with a hint of amusement. "I did evade Blackwell's men across 3 states before meeting you." "True enough," he conceded with a small smile. "Still, caution serves us both. Sleep," she said gently. "I'll keep watch." As Brayden drifted off, Violet took stock of their situation. The danger was real, the journey ahead long and uncertain. Yet for the first time since fleeing Chicago, she didn't feel entirely alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. She studied Brayden as he slept, the strong lines of his face relaxed in slumber, the gray at his temples somehow making him more handsome rather than less. In just days, he had become her anchor in a storm-tossed world. The realization that she was developing feelings for him beyond gratitude was both thrilling and terrifying. Such thoughts were dangerous, she reminded herself. Her life was in chaos, her future uncertain, and Brayden deserved better than to be dragged further into her troubles. Yet her heart refused to heed these sensible warnings. They resumed their journey that evening, traveling by moonlight to make up time lost during their rest. The landscape grew increasingly rugged, with steep mountain passes and dense forests. Brayden navigated confidently, occasionally consulting a compass, but mostly relying on his knowledge of the territory. "How did you learn the land so well?" Violet asked as they picked their way along a narrow trail. "Spent 2 years as a scout for the army after settling here," he explained. "Mapped much of this territory. Later did some guiding for survey teams and the occasional lost Easterner. Is that what you did before I dropped into your life? Guiding, Brayden shook his head. Mostly ranching, raising horses. I prefer the company of animals to most people. Yet here you are, helping a stranger across the wilderness, she observed. He glanced back at her, expression unreadable in the moonlight. Perhaps you're not most people. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Days blended together as they traveled, establishing a rhythm of movement and rest, gradually heading northwest toward California. They avoided main trails and settlements where possible, occasionally glimpsing distant riders but encountering no one directly. Brayden taught Violet wilderness skills: how to move silently, how to find water, which plants were edible or medicinal. She proved an apt pupil, her city-bred manners giving way to frontier practicality. In return, she shared stories of the world he had left behind: literature, art, music, and the changing political landscape of the East. One evening, camped beside a mountain stream, Violet noticed Brayden wincing as he unsaddled the horses. "Your leg is bothering you again," she observed, moving to help with the tack. "It's nothing," he dismissed, but allowed her to take Storm's saddle. "Stubborn man," she chided gently. "Sit. Let me look at it." To her surprise, he complied, lowering himself onto a fallen log while she finished with the horses. When she knelt beside him, he hesitated before rolling up his pant leg to reveal an ugly scar running from knee to mid-calf. "Minier ball at Gettysburg," he explained tersely. "Shattered the bone." Army surgeon wanted to amputate, but a nurse convinced him to try saving it. Violet examined the scar with gentle fingers. It healed remarkably well, considering field medicine. Still aches when weather's changing. He looked skyward. "Storm coming tomorrow, I'd wager." "I have some willow bark in my pack," Violet said, rising. "My aunt taught me to make a tea for pain before she moved west." As she prepared the remedy over their small fire, Brayden watched her with curious eyes. "You're not what I expected, Violet Lambert. What did you expect?" she asked, concentrating on her task. "Someone more broken, I suppose, after all you've been through." Violet looked up, meeting his gaze. "I was broken when you found me. Perhaps I still am in some ways, but I'm finding pieces of myself again." She handed him the steaming cup. "Some new, some old." Their fingers brushed in the exchange, lingering longer than necessary. Neither acknowledged it, but something shifted between them, another step toward an unnamed destination. Brayden's prediction proved accurate. By morning, dark clouds gathered overhead, and by midday, rain fell in heavy sheets. They pressed on, wrapped in oilskin dusters Brayden had purchased at the trading post, but soon the downpour made progress dangerous on the slippery mountain trails. "We need shelter," Brayden shouted over the storm's roar. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 2 miles ahead if I've got our position right." They pushed forward, the horses struggling against wind and rain. Lightning cracked overhead, followed by booming thunder that made Penny skittish. Violet controlled her mount admirably, earning an approving nod from Brayden. The cabin appeared as a dim shape through the curtain of rain, little more than a crude shelter with a partially collapsed roof, but better than nothing. They hurried the horses to the lean-to attached to one side before ducking inside. The interior was musty but dry where the roof remained intact. Brayden quickly assessed the structure. "Half the roof's gone, but this corner's sound," he declared, moving debris to create space in the driest section. "We'll have to wait out the worst of it here." Violet unpacked what they needed while Brayden secured the door against the wind. Their clothing was soaked despite the dusters, and both were shivering as night approached. "We need a fire," Brayden said, examining the old stone fireplace. Chimney looks clear enough." He managed to get a small blaze going using dry kindling from his pack, and what little seasoned wood remained stacked beside the hearth. The flames cast dancing shadows across the cabin's interior as rain drummed relentlessly on what remained of the roof. "You should change into dry clothes," Brayden suggested, deliberately turning his attention to arranging their bedrolls near the fire. "I'll check on the horses again." He stepped outside, giving Violet privacy to change into her spare clothing. When he returned, dripping anew, she had dressed and spread their wet garments near the fire to dry. "The horses are settled," he reported. "Storm's not happy about the thunder, but they're dry enough." Violet handed him his spare clothes. "Your turn. I'll look at the maps." She busied herself with their travel plans while Brayden changed, studying the rough chart he had drawn showing their progress toward California. They were perhaps a quarter of the way to their destination, the most challenging terrain still ahead. "We're making good time," Brayden commented, joining her once he'd changed. His hair was damp, curling slightly at the neck, giving him a softer appearance than usual. "How long do you think the journey will take?" she asked, making room for him beside the map. 3 weeks, maybe 4 depending on weather and whether we need to alter course." He traced their route with his finger. "The Sierra Nevada will be the greatest challenge. We'll need to cross before the first snows." The cabin creaked ominously as a gust of wind hit it. Violet glanced nervously at the damaged roof. "It stood this long," Brayden assured her. "It'll last the night." They shared a simple meal of beans and dried beef, huddled close to the fire as temperature dropped with nightfall. The storm showed no signs of abating, rain occasionally finding its way through the damaged roof to splash on the floor nearby. "Tell me more about your aunt in San Francisco," Brayden said as they finished eating. "The one we're journeying to find." Violet smiled at the memory. "Aunt Margaret. My mother's younger sister. She was always the family scandal, refused an arranged marriage, traveled to Europe alone, eventually married a sea captain and moved west with him when I was 15. Sounds like a woman of spirit. She was. I don't know if she's even still there. Her husband died 2 years ago, lost at sea. Her last letter mentioned she'd opened a bookshop in San Francisco." Violet stared into the fire. "She always understood me better than anyone in the family, said I had her spirit, not the Lambert practicality." "She sounds right about that," Brayden observed with a small smile. "What will you do?" Violet asked suddenly. "After we reach San Francisco, will you return here?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "Get you safely to your aunt first." "Then, I'm not sure." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the storm's fury outside. Violet found herself watching Brayden's profile, the way the firelight caught the angles of his face, highlighting the small scar above his eyebrow, the firm line of his jaw. "You're staring," he said quietly, not looking at her. Violet blushed. "I'm sorry. I was just thinking how different my life would be if you hadn't found me by those tracks." Now he did turn to her, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Different for us both." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. They sat close together, the storm isolating them from the world, creating an intimacy neither had anticipated. "I've never met a man like you, Brayden Foster," Violet said softly. "Someone who acts from principle rather than advantage." "You haven't known many good men then," he replied. "Perhaps not. Or perhaps you're exceptional." Something changed in his eyes, a guard lowering, revealing emotions he'd kept carefully hidden. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light against her cheek. Violet held her breath, caught in the gravity of the moment. Thunder crashed overhead, but neither startled, too absorbed in the unspoken communication passing between them. Brayden leaned closer, pausing just shy of her lips, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. Instead, Violet closed the distance between them, her hand rising to rest against his chest as their lips met. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. When Violet responded, sliding her hand up to his shoulder, Brayden deepened the kiss, his arm encircling her waist to draw her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly, eyes searching each other's faces in the firelight. "I shouldn't have done that," Brayden said, though he made no move to increase the distance between them. "Why not?" Violet challenged softly. "You're vulnerable, running for your life. It wouldn't be right to what? To care for me, to let me care for you." Her eyes held his. "I may be running, Brayden, but my heart and mind are my own. Don't make decisions for me out of some misplaced sense of honor." A smile tugged at his lips. "You're a formidable woman, Violet Lambert. And you're changing the subject," she pointed out, her hand still resting on his shoulder. Brayden covered her hand with his own. "This journey is dangerous enough without complications." "Is that what I am, a complication?" "The most beautiful complication I've ever encountered," he admitted, the words escaping before he could reconsider them. Violet's expression softened. "We don't know what tomorrow brings. The men pursuing me could find us. We could face 100 dangers before reaching San Francisco. But tonight, in this moment, I know that I care for you. That seems worth acknowledging, doesn't it?" Brayden studied her face, seeing the determination there alongside the vulnerability. Slowly he nodded. "Yes, it does." This time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, only the certainty of two people finding unexpected connection in the midst of crisis. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin's weathered walls, something precious and fragile was taking root. They spoke long into the night, sharing stories and secrets they'd told no one else, gradually falling asleep beside the fire, Violet's head resting on Brayden's shoulder, his arm protectively around her. Morning brought clearing skies and new understanding between them. Neither spoke directly of what had changed, but it was evident in the way Brayden's hand lingered when helping Violet mount Penny, in the way her eyes sought his as they rode. The storm had altered the landscape, washing out sections of trail and swelling streams. Their progress slowed as Brayden carefully navigated the treacherous terrain, prioritizing safety over speed. By midday, they reached a river crossing that had become a raging torrent overnight. "We'll have to find another way," Brayden decided, surveying the dangerous waters. "There's a bridge about 10 miles north, but that takes us closer to Silverton than I'd like." "Is there no other crossing?" Violet asked, concerned. Brayden considered their options. "There's a narrower point about 5 miles downstream, but the banks are steep. It would be challenging." "I'll take challenging over dangerous," she replied firmly. They headed downstream, picking their way along the riverbank. The floodwaters had carved away sections of the bank, forcing them to detour through dense underbrush at times. By late afternoon, they reached the narrower section Brayden had mentioned. "We'll cross here," he decided, dismounting to examine the ford more closely. "The current's still strong but manageable. I'll go first with Storm, test the depth. You follow exactly where I go, understand?" Violet nodded, watching anxiously as Brayden urged his horse into the churning water. Storm was hesitant but responsive to his rider's commands. The water rose to the horse's chest at the deepest point, but they made steady progress. When Brayden reached the far side, he waved for Violet to follow. Taking a deep breath, she guided Penny into the river, keeping to the path Brayden had taken. The mare balked initially, nervous of the rushing water, but Violet spoke soothingly, maintaining firm control. Halfway across, disaster struck. A large branch, carried by the current, slammed into Penny's legs. The horse reared in panic, throwing Violet into the raging water. "Violet!" Brayden's shout barely registered as she was swept downstream, fighting desperately to keep her head above water. The current tumbled her mercilessly, slamming her against submerged rocks. She gasped for air, choking on water, arms flailing for purchase. Through her panic, she heard pounding hooves along the bank. Brayden was racing alongside the river, seeking a point to intercept her. Just as her strength began to fail, she felt something catch her clothing, a low-hanging branch. She clung to it, but the current pulled relentlessly at her body. "Hold on," Brayden called, dismounting and working his way carefully along the bank. He tied a rope to a tree, then wrapped the other end around his waist. "I'm coming for you." The branch Violet clung to creaked ominously. "It's breaking," she cried, her fingers numbing from the cold water and desperate grip. Brayden waded into the river, fighting the current as he worked his way toward her. Just as the branch gave way, his hand closed around her wrist. The current yanked them both, but the rope held, and Brayden's strength prevailed as he pulled them toward the shore. They collapsed on the bank, gasping for breath, Violet coughing up river water. Brayden held her tightly, his heart pounding against her back. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, his voice ragged with emotion. Violet turned in his arms, her soaked clothing plastered to her skin, hair streaming water. "You found me once by the tracks. Seems you're determined to keep finding me." Despite the danger just past, Brayden found himself laughing, a release of tension and fear. "Determined woman," he murmured, brushing wet hair from her face. "Can't you stay out of trouble for one day?" "Apparently not when you're around to rescue me," she replied, then sobered. "Penny made it across after you fell. She's up there with Storm." Brayden helped Violet to her feet. "We need to get you warm and dry before nightfall." They retrieved the horses and found shelter in a stand of pines, where Brayden quickly built a fire. Violet changed into dry clothes behind a hastily arranged blanket, then huddled near the flames, shivering despite the warmth. "Drink this," Brayden said, passing her a tin cup of whiskey from his supplies. "It'll warm you from the inside." Violet took a cautious sip, coughing at the burn. "That's potent." "Medicinal," he insisted with a small smile, setting coffee to boil. As color returned to her cheeks, Brayden examined the cuts and bruises she'd acquired in the river. None were serious, but they added to her collection of injuries. "You're the most accident-prone woman I've ever met," he observed, applying salve to a cut on her arm. "Or the most pursued," she countered. "Though I admit the river wasn't Blackwell's doing." Brayden's expression darkened at the mention of her enemy. "We're still a long way from San Francisco, and I'm beginning to think these men will follow you all the way to California." "I know," Violet said quietly. "I've been thinking the same thing. Perhaps I should turn myself in, face Blackwell directly rather than running forever." "Absolutely not," Brayden's response was immediate and forceful. "That man had you thrown from a train. He won't hesitate to kill you if you're within his reach again." "Then what? I can't run forever, and I can't ask you to abandon your life indefinitely to protect me." Brayden took her hands in his. "We'll figure it out together. When we reach San Francisco, there are options. The law is different there. Your testimony could be taken by territorial judges, federal marshals." He squeezed her hands gently. "I won't let you face this alone, Violet. Not now. Not ever if you'll have me." The declaration hung between them, more significant than either had anticipated. Violet's eyes widened slightly as she absorbed his words. "If I'll have you," she repeated softly. Brayden looked momentarily uncertain, then committed to his course. I know it's fast, unconventional, but this journey has shown me what kind of woman you are, brave, principled, stronger than you know." He released her hands, giving her space. "I'm not proposing marriage here in the wilderness, just telling you that my commitment to your safety to you extends beyond this journey." Violet studied his face, seeing the sincerity there. "When I was thrown from that train, I thought my life was over. Then you found me, and gradually I started believing in possibilities again." She moved closer, her hand finding his. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it, Brayden Foster." The kiss they shared beside the fire held promise of comfort, of partnership, of a future neither had imagined before fate brought them together beside railroad tracks in the Wyoming wilderness. Days blended into weeks as they continued their journey westward, gradually leaving the Rocky Mountains behind and entering the Great Basin. The landscape changed dramatically from dense forests to vast open spaces where they could see for miles in every direction. This new terrain brought different challenges. Water became precious, shade scarce during daylight hours. They traveled increasingly at dawn and dusk, resting during the hottest part of the day. Their relationship deepened through shared hardships and quiet moments, alike Brayden teaching Violet to shoot more accurately. Violet reading aloud from a small volume of poetry she'd carried from Chicago. Occasionally, they encountered other travelers, a wagon train heading to Oregon, solitary prospectors, a group of Mormon settlers. Each time, Brayden introduced them as husband and wife traveling to visit family in California. The simple fiction became comfortable, almost natural, though neither spoke of making it reality. In a small settlement where they stopped briefly for supplies, Violet purchased fabric and sewed herself a simple dress to replace her tattered city clothing. The transformation was remarkable, the frontier-style garment, and her sun-bronzed skin making her nearly unrecognizable from the refined Boston lady she'd once been. "You look like you belong out here now," Brayden observed as they rode away from the settlement. "No one would mistake you for an Eastern Society woman." Violet laughed, adjusting her broad-brimmed hat against the sun. "My finishing school teachers would be appalled. I've forgotten half my manners and learned skills they'd consider scandalous for a lady." "Useful skills," Brayden corrected. "The kind that keep you alive out here." "Yes," she agreed thoughtfully. "I feel more alive now than I ever did at society functions, despite the danger." As they approached the Sierra Nevada, the final major obstacle before California, signs of pursuit diminished. They had heard no reports of men seeking a woman of Violet's description for weeks, leading to cautious optimism that perhaps Blackwell's men had abandoned the search, or at least lost their trail. "Don't let your guard down," Brayden warned nonetheless. "Men like Blackwell don't forget." "I know," Violet agreed soberly. "But perhaps we've bought enough time to reach San Francisco and seek proper legal protection." The mountains loomed before them, majestic and intimidating. Early autumn had brought cooler temperatures to the high country, a warning that winter would eventually close these passes. "We need to cross before the first snow," Brayden explained as they made camp in the foothills. "Once that starts, these mountains become deadly." They began their ascent the following day, the trail growing steeper and more treacherous. The horses struggled in places, forcing them to dismount and lead the animals through the most difficult sections. Nights grew colder, requiring them to sleep closer together for warmth. A development neither complained about. 3 days into the mountains, they encountered an elderly prospector heading east. He shared coffee with them and news of the trail ahead. "Road's washed out about 10 miles on," he warned. "Slide took it out last spring. You'll need to take the high pass instead. Adds a day, but safer this time of year. Any other travelers on the trail? Brayden asked casually. The old man scratched his beard thoughtfully. Few miners heading back to the diggings. Oh, and some fancy-dressed fellows asking after a young woman. He glanced at Violet, offering good money for information. Brayden and Violet exchanged alarmed looks. These men, Brayden pressed. How many? Where did you see them? 2 of them. Saw 'em in Georgetown 'bout 4 days back. Said they represented some businessmen from back east. The prospector eyed them shrewdly. You folks in some kind of trouble? No trouble, Brayden assured him. Just cautious travelers. After the old man continued on his way, Violet turned to Brayden, anxiety etched on her face. They're still coming. Georgetown is on the western slope, Brayden reasoned. If they were there 4 days ago, they could be anywhere in these mountains now. Or waiting for us on the other side, Violet added grimly. We'll take the high pass, Brayden decided. Less traveled, and we'll move faster. They pushed harder in the days that followed, taking fewer breaks, making camp later and breaking it earlier. The strain began to show in both riders and horses, but fear of their pursuers drove them onward. The high pass proved challenging, a narrow trail winding along steep cliffs, occasionally so tight that the horses barely fit through. One misstep could mean disaster, but Brayden led confidently, having crossed these mountains before. On their second day on the high pass, a storm gathered ominously over the peaks. Dark clouds rolled in with alarming speed, the temperature dropping rapidly. We need shelter, Brayden called over the rising wind. There's a line shack used by shepherds about a mile ahead. They urged the tired horses forward as the first snowflakes began to fall. By the time the crude shelter came into view, a full blizzard was developing, visibility dropping with each passing minute. The line shack was little more than a stone hut with a wooden roof, but it provided blessed shelter from the howling wind. They hurried the horses into a small attached lean-to, then carried their essential supplies inside. Early snow, Brayden observed grimly, securing the door against the wind. Bad luck. How long will it last? Violet asked, shivering as she helped unpack their bedrolls. Mountain storms are unpredictable, could be hours or days. He examined their supplies. We have enough food for a week if we're careful. Water won't be a problem with snow. The interior of the hut was Spartan, a small fireplace, a rough wooden platform for sleeping, and little else. Brayden quickly got a fire going using the small supply of wood stacked inside, supplemented by what they carried. As night fell, the storm intensified. Wind shrieked through cracks in the stone walls, snow accumulating rapidly outside. Inside, they huddled close to the fire, sharing warmth and what comfort they could find in each other's presence. We've come so far, Violet said softly, watching the flames dance. To be stopped by weather seems almost ironic. We're not stopped, Brayden corrected, his arm around her shoulders. Just delayed. This storm will pass and will continue. Violet rested her head against him. And when we reach San Francisco, what then? The question had hovered between them for weeks, unasked until now. Brayden was silent for a long moment, considering his answer. I meant what I said before, he finally replied. My commitment to you doesn't end with this journey. He shifted to face her directly. I know we met under unusual circumstances. I know this isn't how most people come to care for each other, but I do care for you, Violet, deeply. And I for you, she said softly. More than I thought possible after everything that happened in Chicago. When we reach San Francisco, I want to help you find your aunt, get you settled safely. His voice grew more hesitant. And then, if you're willing, I'd like to court you properly. No pretending to be husband and wife for convenience. Real courtship with your aunt's approval. Violet smiled, touched by his traditional approach despite their decidedly unconventional situation. You'd stay in San Francisco. What about your ranch? A ranch can be sold. Land can be bought elsewhere. His eyes held hers. What can't be replaced is what I've found with you. The declaration hung between them, heartfelt and honest. Violet reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. Yes, she whispered. I'd like that very much. Their kiss was tender, unhurried, a promise rather than passion, though that simmered beneath the surface. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the shelter of the shepherd's hut, hope blossomed. They were trapped for 3 days as the storm deposited nearly 2 feet of snow across the high country. When they finally emerged, they found a transformed landscape, pristine white, covering every surface, the air crystal clear, revealing spectacular vistas of the Sierra Nevada. Beautiful, Violet breathed, taking in the scene. And dangerous, Brayden cautioned. The snow makes the trail treacherous. We'll need to move carefully. Progress slowed to a crawl as they picked their way through snow-covered paths, leading the horses through the most precarious sections. By the 3rd day after the storm, they crested the final pass. California spread before them like a promise. We made it, Violet said, relief evident in her voice as they began their descent toward the western foothills. Not quite yet, Brayden tempered her enthusiasm. We still have a few days' journey to San Francisco, but the worst is behind us. They stopped that night in a small mining settlement, risking civilization for the first time in weeks. The modest inn offered real beds and hot food, luxuries that seemed extravagant after their time in the wilderness. In the privacy of her small room, Violet washed away trail dust and dressed in her frontier dress, marveling at how different she looked from the society woman who had fled Chicago. Her hands were calloused now, her skin tanned, her bearing more confident. The journey had transformed her inside and out. When she joined Brayden for supper in the inn's dining room, she found him similarly refreshed, his beard trimmed, wearing a clean shirt he'd purchased from the general store. They ate hungrily, savoring fresh bread and stew that tasted like ambrosia after weeks of trail rations. 2 days to Sacramento, Brayden said as they lingered over coffee. Then the steamboat to San Francisco. We'll be there within the week. It seems unreal, Violet admitted. After so long running to finally reach safety. We're not there yet, he reminded her gently. We should remain vigilant until we reach your aunt's. Violet nodded, sobering at the reminder. Of course, She hesitated. Part of me will miss this journey despite the danger. It's changed me. For the better, Brayden observed. Though you were already remarkable when I found you by those tracks, she smiled at the memory. Bruised and half-conscious is hardly remarkable. Surviving what you did took extraordinary strength, he countered. I merely helped you continue what you'd already begun, fighting for your freedom and your principles. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the innkeeper with fresh coffee. The man lingered, unusually attentive to their needs. Passing through, are you? He asked with forced casualness. Heading to visit family in Sacramento, Brayden replied, his posture subtly shifting to alertness. Interesting, the innkeeper said. Had some gentleman through here a few days back, asking after a couple matching your description. Seemed mighty interested in finding you. Violet felt her heart stutter but maintained her composure. Is that so? I can't imagine who would be looking for us. Said they represented a worried father, the man continued, watching their reactions. Offering a substantial reward for information about his daughter's whereabouts. Brayden's expression remained impassive. Well, my wife and I keep to ourselves. Not surprising her father might be concerned, given how far we've traveled. The innkeeper nodded slowly. Those gentlemen left a message, should anyone fitting your description pass through. Said there'd be good money for whoever delivered it. And what message was that? Brayden asked, his hand casually moving closer to the pistol concealed beneath his coat. Just that her father wants her to come home, that all will be forgiven if she returns voluntarily. The innkeeper's eyes fixed on Violet, said she might be traveling under duress. Violet straightened, meeting the man's gaze directly. I assure you, sir, I am exactly where I wish to be, with the man I choose to be with. My father's concern, while touching, is unnecessary. For a long moment the innkeeper studied them both, then he sighed heavily. Figured as much. Those men had a look about them I didn't care for. Too smooth, if you take my meaning. Brayden's tension eased slightly. And did you tell them we'd been here? Haven't seen hide nor hair of you, the innkeeper replied with a wink. And I'd suggest you be on your way before first light tomorrow. Those men mentioned checking back here regularly. We're much obliged for your discretion, Brayden said, sliding several coins across the table, far more than their meal was worth. The innkeeper pocketed the money with a nod. My sister ran off with a man her father didn't approve of 30 years ago. Best decision she ever made. He leaned closer. There's a back way out of town that avoids the main road. I'll draw you a map. That night they prepared to leave well before dawn. Brayden came to Violet's room to help with her belongings, finding her standing by the window, gazing at the stars. Ready? He asked softly. She turned to him, moonlight silvering her profile. Almost there, she whispered. I can hardly believe it. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the sleeping town. One final push and you'll be free of Blackwell's shadow. We will be free, she corrected, taking his hand. This is our journey now, not just mine. Brayden lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. Always. They slipped from the inn in the darkest hour before dawn, following the innkeeper's map to a trail that wound through the foothills, bypassing the main road to Sacramento. By sunrise, they were miles from the settlement, pushing hard toward the California capital. The landscape changed gradually as they descended, more verdant, with streams flowing west instead of east, trees growing taller and more abundant. The air carried different scents, hints of distant ocean, mixed with pine and wildflowers. They reached Sacramento late on the second day, a bustling city that felt overwhelming after weeks in the wilderness. Here they sold their horses, faithful companions, who had carried them across a continent, securing passage on a steamboat that would take them down the Sacramento River to San Francisco Bay. As the steamboat pulled away from the dock the following morning, Violet stood at the rail, watching the city recede. Brayden joined her, placing a protective arm around her waist. Last leg of our journey, he said, nodding toward the horizon where the river wound toward the distant bay. It feels strange, Violet admitted, to be surrounded by people again, to have solid decking beneath my feet instead of a saddle. You'll readjust, he assured her, though I suspect the wilderness has claimed a piece of your heart. She leaned against him. It has. As has its most skilled guide. The steamboat journey passed uneventfully, the vessel making steady progress downriver. By late afternoon, the expanse of San Francisco Bay came into view, the city rising on its famous hills beyond. Violet gasped at the sight. It's beautiful. And large enough to get lost in, Brayden observed. A good place to disappear if needed. As they approached the busy port, reality began to set in. They would need to locate Violet's aunt in this sprawling city, with only the knowledge that she had opened a bookshop after her husband's death. We'll start in the business district, Brayden planned as they gathered their belongings. Ask at other bookshops. Someone will know of her. They disembarked amid the controlled chaos of San Francisco's waterfront sailors, merchants, laborers, and passengers, creating a cacophony of sound and movement. After the solitude of their journey, the city's energy was both exhilarating and overwhelming. They secured rooms at a modest hotel near the waterfront, maintaining their husband and wife pretense for propriety's sake. After settling their belongings, they ventured out to begin their search for Margaret Phillips, Violet's aunt. The business district revealed 3 bookshops, but none owned by Margaret Phillips. At the third, however, the proprietor recognized the name, Phillips Books and Curiosities, he recalled. Over on Montgomery Street near Washington, opened about a year ago. Unusual selection, not just the standard fare, but scientific works, foreign languages, that sort of thing. Armed with this information, they made their way to Montgomery Street as afternoon faded toward evening. The shop, when they found it, was exactly as described, a charming storefront with an eclectic window display featuring everything from leather-bound classics to scientific instruments. A bell jingled as they entered, the interior warm and inviting, smelling pleasantly of paper, leather, and binding glue. A woman emerged from behind a curtained doorway, tall and slender, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun, glasses perched on her nose. Violet froze, emotion overwhelming her. "Aunt Margaret," the woman stared, recognition dawning slowly. Violet Lambert," she rushed forward, arms outstretched. "My dear girl, I had nearly given up hope." The reunion was tearful and joyous. Margaret embraced her niece tightly, then held her at arm's length to examine her. "Look at you," she marveled. "So changed from the society miss I last saw. And who is this gentleman?" Her sharp eyes turned to Brayden, who stood respectfully aside. "This is Brayden Foster," Violet introduced him. "He saved my life. Multiple times, in fact. I wouldn't be here without him." Margaret assessed Brayden with keen interest. "Then I am deeply in your debt, Mr. Foster." "No debt, madam," he replied. "It's been my privilege to accompany your niece." Margaret locked the shop's door and turned the sign to closed before ushering them upstairs to her living quarters above the store. The apartment was cozy and eclectic, filled with books, artifacts from her husband's sailing days, and comfortable furniture. Over tea, Violet recounted her story, the murder she had witnessed, Blackwell's threats, her flight from Chicago, and the men who had pursued her across the continent. Margaret listened with mounting horror. "Your father refused to believe you?" she asked incredulously. "William always was blind when it came to business, but this exceeds even his usual foolishness. He chose his partnership with Blackwell over his own daughter," Violet confirmed sadly. "But I've made peace with that choice. It showed me who he truly is. And these men are still pursuing you?" Margaret asked, concern evident. Brayden nodded. "We've stayed ahead of them, but they were asking after Violet in the Sierras just days ago. They're persistent." "Then you'll stay here," Margaret declared firmly. "Both of you. I have room and there's safety in numbers. Besides," she added with a pointed look at their travel-worn appearance, "you both look like you could use some proper rest and regular meals." The offer was too sensible to refuse. Margaret prepared the spare bedroom for Violet and insisted Brayden take the small study, which had a comfortable divan. The arrangement provided safety and propriety while they considered their next steps. Over the following days, they settled into a routine. Margaret reopened her shop with Violet helping customers and Brayden assisting with heavy inventory and security. They maintained vigilance, but San Francisco's size and bustle provided a degree of anonymity they hadn't enjoyed since beginning their journey. A week after their arrival, Brayden suggested they consult a lawyer about Violet's situation. "Your testimony about the murder could still be valuable," he reasoned. Federal authorities might be interested, even if Chicago's police were in Blackwell's pocket. Margaret knew of a reputable attorney, Jonathan Reynolds, who had helped settle her husband's estate. They arranged to meet him at his office, away from the bookshop to maintain discretion. Reynolds listened carefully to Violet's account, taking detailed notes. When she finished, he sat back, tapping his pencil thoughtfully. "This is a complex situation, Miss Lambert. Crossing state lines complicates jurisdiction, but it also opens federal avenues." He sorted through some papers on his desk. "As it happens, there's a federal investigation already underway into labor practices at several Chicago factories, including Blackwell's. Your testimony could be valuable to that case." "Would that mean returning to Chicago?" Violet asked, tension evident in her voice. Reynolds shook his head. "Not necessarily. I can arrange for a federal marshal to take your deposition here. If the case proceeds to trial, you might eventually need to testify in person, but that would be months away, with proper protection provided." Brayden, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "And what about the men pursuing Miss Lambert? Can anything be done to stop them?" "With a formal complaint filed, we could request protection," Reynolds confirmed. "But more effectively, we could seek an injunction against Blackwell, legally prohibiting him from sending agents after you." Hope bloomed in Violet's chest for the first time since witnessing the murder. "Could that really work?" "It's not foolproof," Reynolds cautioned. "But it changes the dynamic. Right now, you're simply running. With legal proceedings initiated, Blackwell becomes the one under scrutiny." They left the attorney's office with a plan in place. Reynolds would contact federal authorities and begin preparing Violet's formal statement. In the meantime, they would remain vigilant but continue establishing their new lives in San Francisco. "It feels strange," Violet commented that evening as they walked along the waterfront with Margaret, "to be fighting back instead of just running." "It suits you," Brayden observed. "You were never meant to be just a victim, Violet." 2 weeks after their arrival, with legal proceedings underway, Brayden approached Violet as she arranged a display of new books in the shop window. "I'd like to speak with you," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. "If you have a moment." Curious, Violet followed him to the small reading nook at the back of the store. Brayden seemed nervous, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "What is it?" she prompted gently. "I've been thinking about our future," he began. "About what comes next, now that we've reached San Francisco." Violet's heart quickened. "And what have you concluded?" "I went to see a real estate agent yesterday," he said, surprising her. "There's land available north of the city in Sonoma County. Good grazing land, suitable for raising horses." He paused, gathering his courage. "I've made an offer on it." "You're staying in California?" Violet asked, hope rising in her voice. "If you'll have me," he replied simply. "I meant what I said in the mountains, Violet. I want to court you properly. Build a life together if that's what you want to." She stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. "It is what I want, more than anything." "Your aunt has given her blessing," Brayden continued, gaining confidence. "Though she insists on proper courtship, despite our having already traveled halfway across the continent together." Violet laughed softly. "Aunt Margaret is traditional in some ways, despite her independent spirit." "Traditional enough that she expects me to do this properly," Brayden said, and to Violet's astonishment, he lowered himself to one knee before her. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "I know it's soon. I know our beginning was unusual. But I love you, Violet Lambert, and I want to spend my life with you, not protecting you, but partnering with you in whatever adventures lie ahead." Tears welled in Violet's eyes as she looked down at this man who had changed her life so completely. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Brayden Foster. I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. As he rose to his feet, their lips met in a kiss that sealed their commitment, witnessed only by the books surrounding them and Margaret, who watched approvingly from the doorway. The wedding took place 3 months later in a small chapel overlooking the bay. By then, Violet's deposition had been taken by federal authorities, and an injunction issued against Blackwell, legally forbidding him from pursuing her. Reports from Chicago indicated he faced mounting legal troubles as the federal investigation into his business practices intensified. Margaret gave the bride away, resplendent in a gown of deep blue silk that complemented Violet's simple cream dress. Brayden stood tall and proud at the altar, scarcely recognizable as the solitary rancher who had found a battered woman beside railroad tracks half a year earlier. Their vows were simple but profound, spoken with the depth of understanding that comes only through facing danger and uncertainty together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss held the promise of a future neither had imagined before fate intervened. The small ranch in Sonoma became their home, a place where Brayden could raise the horses he loved, while remaining close enough to San Francisco for Violet to maintain her growing role in her aunt's bookshop. They built a life balanced between wilderness and civilization, finding joy in both worlds. A year after their wedding, as they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset, Violet placed Brayden's hand gently over her slightly rounded belly. "Our family is growing," she said softly, watching his expression transform from confusion to wonder. "A child." He whispered, awe in his voice. Violet nodded, tears of joy in her eyes. "Due in the spring, a new journey for us both." Brayden gathered her in his arms, overwhelmed with emotion. "From the moment I lifted you from those tracks, you've brought nothing but blessing to my life," he murmured against her hair. "And you to mine," she replied, nestling against his chest. "My rescuer, my partner, my love." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, planning their future, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had since that fateful day when a battered woman was found beside the tracks, and a lonely cowboy had said the words that changed both their lives forever. "Your journey's with me."